You're tuned in to Positively Terrible. I'm producer Dan, and each week my buddy Scott and I discuss surviving and thriving after trauma. It's a journey that started when Scott, his wife's fiance, and her boyfriend all walked into a bar. This week's decent human being is Sean. He's got a fucked up story about trauma, addiction, and recovery. Settle in, my terrible listeners. Today's episode is going to be positively terrible.
I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, producer Dan, how's it going today?
Man, it's going pretty good. How are you?
Oh, I'm tired, but feeling pretty good. But I can't stay tired when you read the intro. It makes me feel so good. I feel like I have to rip off my my warm-up pants right now, maybe stretch
That's
out
a
a
really
little
good
bit.
idea. Yeah. Or you should get one of those tearaway shirts like Hulk Hogan has.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And that is a great segue because we've got a guest today who loves the wrestling. That's not what he's here to talk about today. But Sean, how you doing this morning?
I'm good. My whole military career was kind of a shit show, filled with addiction, trauma, and all kinds of stuff. So I'm glad to be here and talk about my fucked up situation.
Yeah,
We appreciate you sharing it with us, man.
We definitely do. And Sean, you are a host of a couple of podcasts. We'll give you a minute at the end to plug it, but what are the names right now of your podcasts?
So my first one, my baby, is called Recover Out Loud, where we talk about addiction and recovery. And my second one that is going to be debuting soon is called Beyond the Veil.
All right. Awesome. I'm excited.
What's the teaser on Beyond the Veil?
Oh, man.
It's a good name.
Paranormal and supernatural.
Ooh.
That's the money-making podcast. It's really nice to talk about addiction and recovery and all that, but you want to make some money, man. Let's talk paranormal.
Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but yeah, absolutely.
All right. So today you're going to talk a little bit about your trauma, your addiction and recovery. And we talked a little bit about your military service and just kind of want to get some background here. What branch of the military did you serve in?
I was in the Army for 12 and a half years.
Okay. Is that something that you kind of knew you were going to do growing up?
9/11 was kind of like the deciding factor. And I know that's like really cheesy. If you talk to a lot of veterans, that might be their answer. But 9/11 was the day that I was like, I got to do something. Unfortunately, I was in 7th grade at the time, so I really couldn't make any moves. Through life and through childhood, my focus kind of shifted. And my dad and I had a falling out when I was 17 years old. And I told him I didn't want to join the Army or the military in general. And I wanted to become a pastor. I was a good church boy. And he said, no, you're going to join the military because you need structure in your life. We fell out. I ended up walking into a recruiting station and signing a contract that day.
Wow. Was your dad or did you have a military family? Had others served before?
My great-grandfather was a Cav Scout in World War II. And so one of his jobs was to shut down the Nazi concentration camps. And my grandfather was a Marine in Vietnam. So my dad never served. Nobody else in my family served. And I just felt this like calling that was greater than myself.
Okay. And what was going on in your life that your dad thought that you needed structure?
Oh, my goodness. I was a kid and I was a product of my father.
Okay, that leads to a lot of questions, and of course, anything that you are not comfortable with, you don't have to talk about. But what do you mean by that? What was his deal?
Okay, so my father was an addict, alcoholic.
Got it.
And he was very abusive.
Okay.
And so my whole childhood was pretty fucking traumatic to me, and that was one of the things I had to work on later on in life. But it was very traumatic. I got kicked out of my dad's house at the age of 16, ended up sent to my grandparents' house in Maryland, back where I grew up at. And when I got there, I started falling into faith and into a religion, and Dad was like, I don't like that, right? Like,
Huh.
and he was trying to control my life from a distance, and he made it really hard for me when I was a child. And unfortunately, I kind of bowed to his will. Unfortunately and fortunately.
Mm-hmm. What is the fortunate part?
I got to go see the world.
Okay.
I got to
So
go do things. I got to go do things and see things that you only read in books and see on TV, and it was amazing.
Yeah. It sounds. I mean, that is one of the opportunities that I look at when I see people in the military. That's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, and especially. Well, let me ask you. I was going to talk about me, but nobody wants to hear that shit. Where were you from? Like, what type of area? Was it city, rural? I mean, could you tell us that?
I moved around a little bit. So I was born and mostly raised in Sharpsburg, Maryland. And if you're a big history buff and if you know anything about the American Civil War, I grew up right next to the Antietam battlefield.
Okay.
And so I grew up there, and essentially it was like just backwoods. I lived backwoods and grew up around in a community of about 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a small community. And then when I moved with my father, I went from small backwoods Maryland to the city life where the houses were literally pretty much right on each other, small backyard. And it was a huge culture shock at the age of like 10 or 11.
Okay.
And so like adjustment has always been my problem, and it started there.
Okay. So what would you think was the biggest adjustment of making that move?
The biggest adjustment, and this is going to sound really bad, but the biggest adjustment was going from a predominantly actually all white community to now I'm intermingled with people from all cultures, right?
Mm-hmm.
People from the Black community, people from the Hispanic community, communities from Africa, Europe, Eastern Europe, everywhere. And so like having like inserting myself into that and like interacting with kids that I grew up in a Christian household, and I grew
Mm-hmm.
up. I went to a Christian school up into the age of 10 or 11. So growing up with kids that didn't have that background was hard for me because I didn't understand like why they didn't believe these things or why their families didn't go to church on Sunday,
Sure.
or where the actual religious structure was for them. And that's just not the case anymore. But that was one of the hardest adjustments.
Yeah. And I can imagine that. And I am from a rural community, and everyone assumes that your opinions are the same, that you're going to the same church, that I mean there is just a set of expectations when you grew up in rural white America.
Yeah.
So I know, and you said this is going to sound bad, but I understand it. You're going from one homogenous culture, basically. Culture. I don't know if that's the right word. Yeah, it's the right word.
Yeah.
But then you're going to one where you're exposed to a lot more, and it's different. And then I'd imagine that when you join the military, that you've got quite an expansive. You got a lot of different cultures there too. Is that a good assumption to make? I was never in the military.
Absolutely, yeah. You get people from all over the place, like all over the country and the world. There's people who are not national citizens that come in to the military because they want a different way of life. They want to provide better for their family, and all the love and support to them. I've met people who gain their citizenship through the military, through service, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for those human beings because they're some of the most amazing human beings I've ever met in my life.
Okay. So, well, I'm sorry, Dan. It looked like you're going to ask a question.
No, I'm with you. I keep the conversation going. Don't let me screw it up.
Okay, I won't even look at you again, so I don't get confused. Maybe you were just thinking about eating something. Your mouth was hanging up a little bit open, so. But no, Sean.
Hey, I woke up with drool this morning, so it's all good.
It's tough, man, when it gets deep in that beard.
Oh
It
yeah,
smells terrible.
yeah. Oh yeah, we haven't told the listeners yet that today I've got the second best beard in this. Sean's got an impressive one that goes down at least to chest level. I can't see any further down than that.
It was belly button, and it started dying off, and I had to trim it down. So it
Oh no,
goes to
wait,
about
that's a
my
different.
sternum.
I was gonna say that's a trauma in itself. Dying off. What do you mean by that?
So once your hair reaches a certain length, you have, the maintenance is no longer an issue for you, but the roots tend to start dying off, right? So if you don't trim it off, the hair naturally, like a plant, will start, dying off. So you got to trim it down to keep it formed, keep it alive, and stuff like that.
All right. Okay. And I'm sorry. I may not have the second best beard here. Dan's is pretty nice. I just like to take a shot every now and then.
I just got to keep it so short now that it's so gray, man. It used to be a lot mightier, but
I don't think you need to.
Dan's like the Richard Gere of beards.
I mean, you've got to get that about every day, right, Dan?
I should get that every day.
But all right, so Sean, you joined the military, and what is the experience like when you start there? I mean, like, can you just kind of describe what happens when you join the military?
Yeah, so you there's a process prior to joining the military. People think that you just sign a contract and then you go, right? Like, and you're off to the races and you're shooting bad guys, and that's just not the case. So I signed I signed my contract in Baltimore, Maryland, and then I moved up with my dad. I ended up getting sent to Buffalo to get sent out, but I had to take a placement test, right? Every branch of the service, whether it's Marines, Navy, Air Force, Army, and now I guess we got Space Force and Coast Guard.
Okay.
You have to take a placement test, right, to see what job you would fit into. And so when I did it, I went in there and I got a pretty decent score, and I chose to be a forward observer, and I had no clue what that would be, right?
Yeah.
And the the recruiter was like, "Yeah, dude, you're gonna sit in New York and watch bombs drop on a TV." I'm like, "Dude, fuck yeah, I'm for it. Let's do it." Right? It's Call of Duty. Well, Call of Duty wasn't out at that time, but
Okay, right.
so I went to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and right off the bat, Oklahoma sucks. If you guys are from Oklahoma, I'm sorry. Well, at least Fort Sill did it. It was right outside of Lawton, and it's just terrible.
Okay.
Big apologies to both of our Oklahoma listeners. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I'm sorry to you two guys or gals. I appreciate your service in Oklahoma, but it basic training was, in my opinion, really easy because I lived in chaos as a child. I was used to the screaming, the yelling, moving fast, doing all the dumb shit you have to do. So it really wasn't that hard for me. The physical aspect was easy. I was in great shape going into basic training. I was 18 years old. So it was really easy for me. The hardest thing for me in basic training was shooting because I never touched a gun. And I understood the concept of here's your safety. Here's the trigger. I didn't understand the concept of zeroing weapons in or any of that stuff, which was really hard for me. Like I said, I was never raised around guns. My grandfather was in Vietnam, so he was naturally shell-shocked from everything that happened in Vietnam. And I'd only shot in a gun probably once in my life prior to basic training. And so that was the hardest. And I graduated basic, and I went into what's called advanced individual training, where it's your job training. You learn how to, the basics, just like going to any trade school, you learn the basics of your job.
Okay.
And so I learned the basics of my job, which was talking to artillery and mortars. Eventually it would move into helicopters and jets to drop bombs on targets of opportunity or targets of interest.
So if I understand correct, your job was to sit in an office or like an operations type center. You're going to take satellite information. You're going to make sure that the people that are shooting at the right places, have the right information? Is that
yes and no.
okay?
Okay.
That's at a much higher echelon.
Okay.
What my job was to be on the ground, be the eyes for the maneuver unit, right? So for infantry, cavalry, and any unit that would be maneuvering, I worked hand in hand with the patrol leader, so a lieutenant or a senior non-commissioned officer, and I would watch out. And if they said, "Hey, that needs to go," then I would pull up the grid for it, allocate the assets for it, and then call it in.
Got it. So you are helping target those items from the field.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And so I did that, and AIT was a little bit more difficult for me because I'm not like a book study kind of person. I'm practical application. You throw a book at me, like you take one of the books I have on my shelf back here, and you say, "Hey, read this and comprehend it." I'm gonna be like, "Can't."
Right.
It's not obtaining in here. But if you put it in my hands and you say, "This is how you do it," and I do it like 2 times, I got it down for the rest of my life. And so that's where it was like really hard for me. Was they were like, "Hey, read the FM 6.30," and I'm like, "Fuck, what is FM? It's field manual, but I don't understand what this shit means."
Right.
So I graduated AIT. I did all right there, and then I went into airborne school, which airborne. A lot of people you might have heard that term, but it's jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Okay.
Yeah. So you learn how to first you learn how to fall, and that's weird. Then you learn how to land, and that's a little bit more weird. And then they drop you from a 200-foot tower, and then they lead you into jumping out of an actual moving aircraft. And I'm terrified of heights, but the adrenaline rush was amazing. Something I had never experienced before. The thoughts in your head going up and then getting there, and then they open up the door and you're looking down at the ground where you're about to fucking land, and you're like, I could die today. Right? But fuck
Well,
it.
Sean, can I interrupt for just a second?
Mhm.
I'm a little confused how we go from we're going to sit in an office in New York to jumping to being an airborne.
Yeah.
How did we get there?
Well, there's a common theme amongst people that join, and that is that recruiters lie. They tell you what you need, what you want to hear. Because when I initially signed my contract, I didn't want to be combat arms, right?
Uh-huh.
Like I didn't want to do that. I seen what it did to my grandfather. Didn't want to do it. I didn't want to put myself in harm's way. And then when I got to AIT, I was like, well, I'm here. I cannot back out of this shit. I have a contract. And so I kind of adapted to it, right? Like, and I told you like adapting was kind of like my hard thing, but I started to learn to adapt to it. And so when I got to AIT, they said, "Who wants to go airborne?" And I was like, "Fuck it, man. Let's do it. Let's have fun. Let's make the most of this situation."
Okay.
And so I went to airborne school, conducted 5 jumps out of a moving aircraft. It was fun. The first one, when I jumped out, I screamed "fuck" the whole way down, right? Like fuck, 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 fuck. And we were loading up to do the next jump an hour later, and we call them jump masters, so the people that check your equipment to make sure that you are safe, and the people that give you the commands in the aircraft. Was like, "Now who in the fuck yelled fuck the whole way down?" And I was like, "That was me." And he was like, "Don't do that shit again." So I jumped out and like I was like, "Fuck, fuck, 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 fuck." Right. And that fear never went away, right? Like that fear of heights, the fear of jumping never went away. So I graduated airborne school, and they hand you your orders and they say, "Hey, this is where you're going." Now everybody's like going to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, because that's home of the 82nd Airborne, or going up to Alaska, which is like 425, or like Fort Campbell, Fort Drum. And I'm looking and I'm like, Caserma Ederly, where in the fuck is that? And I'm looking on this map of like locations and I can't find it. I'm like, dude, where are you guys sending me? Like, this is scary. And I found out, like, when I got my official orders, like those were the mock orders. When I got my official orders, it was Italy.
Okay.
Now I was like, oh shit, like this is cool. So my first duty station was Italy, and I went over there. And
where in Italy was that?
It was in Vicenza, which is like half an hour from Venice.
Yeah,
it's in the northern part. And I got there in January, and it was just beautiful. January 2007, just absolutely beautiful. Mist all over the place. Like it had just snowed, and like the weather was starting to change a little bit, and like it was just beautiful. And that's where my addiction started. um, so I get there, and the first weekend I'm there, they're like, "Hey, we follow the rules of the land. You can drink." I'm an 18-year-old child, and if you know anything about the human brain, the male brain
Mm-hmm.
does not stop developing till about the age of 23.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I drank like I had been a professional drinker. I made this promise to myself when I was a kid: I'm never going to drink, drug, or smoke. And like I broke 2 of those in the first weekend. Um, left up my own devices. I broke both of them promises in a weekend, and
so,
not
so,
drugs though.
so is when you are in Italy, is this an American base that you're
Yes.
stationed at? Is there an Italian base that has Americans? I mean, how does that?
Yes.
I guess I don't understand how that works.
Okay, so they have these big bases that are called casermas, which are during World War One and Two, they were used to house Italian army
Mm-hmm.
and anybody that was moving through the area. And so the Americans during World War II, we held occupation in Italy, and
Mm-hmm.
so just like we did in Germany and Austria and some other places, we moved out of Austria, but we stayed in Italy, England, Germany, and some other places. And so we had these casermas all over the place. Now in Italy, I think there's 3. There's where I was at. There's Pisa, and there's Naples. And Naples is for Navy, and Pisa is for like military police, which is cool.
Okay.
So we occupied this one in Vicenza, and it was right in the heart, one like kind of like the outskirts of the city. And so we stayed there. Now, when you think of a military base, you think it's like huge, which most of them are, but Vicenza was like a mile by 2 miles. It was very small, and so you had to house quite a few people on the base. So like everybody was cramped, everybody was crowded, and it was just wild. Like everybody knew everybody. If you see this patch, this is the patch for the 173rd. If you see this patch, people are like, "Oh, where were you and when were you?" And so yeah, it's pretty crazy.
All right. Cool.
That sounds like I can imagine being 18. I mean, Italy is beautiful. I've been to Italy a couple times. Fantastic. I can imagine being 18, giving a job. I mean, a job where you make some decent money when you're 18, especially when your housing is paid for, your regular food is paid for. You've just got pocket money like you haven't had before.
Yeah.
And then, all right, you're also allowed to drink in a spot where normally your peers wouldn't be able to drink for another 3 years. So you might drink some beers in the woods, but you're not going out to a bar and just being allowed to do anything.
Yeah.
And you've got like regular time off, right? You've got like some weekend time. You can get out for a day or two and do whatever you want. Am I correct in all of these assumptions?
Yeah. So when you're active military, your job, they say you're a soldier 24/7, but realistically, you're working from 6:30 in the morning to about 5 p.m. at night. And that's it. The rest of the time is yours. You can go out, you can go fuck off, you can go sightsee. The weekends, unless you're doing a training rotation or you have some kind of like 24-hour duty, you're allowed to go do whatever you want. We got 4-day weekends. We have what civilians would be considered, paid leave, where you can just fly wherever. So, I mean, you had a regular-ish life, and you had a social life, but it wasn't like normal, right?
So were you running around with a bunch of other 18-year-olds when you got there? Or was it kind of just a big mix? Oh, it was?
Oh, yeah. We ran around quite a bit. I ran around with, I got introduced to people in my unit. So naturally, we got people of all ages there. They don't like you to fraternize in the Army. So like it would be very rare to see a guy as a private partying with an officer or a non-commissioned officer. But the exception to that is because my unit was so small and there was not very many of us. We all packed in together, right? It would be very common to go to a strip club and see a commanding officer that's fucking married out with his lower enlisted. That happens, it's much like Band of Brothers. So if you've seen that, but yeah, I mean, we were running around, have a good time, that's where I really learned my partying was there, right? Like we would go out 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, go eat something, go out to a bar that would lead to another bar that would lead to a club across town that would lead to a club out of the city, and then you wouldn't be coming home rolling back in until about 10 o'clock in the morning. And it was just insane. And that was the European party style. Now that actually formed an addiction for me because I didn't understand the concept of moderation, right? Like I grew up watching my dad get absolutely shit faced, and I didn't. There was no healthy observation of that. So I had this what's called in the recovery field a hereditary disposition, where if you have a parent that is an addict or an alcoholic, you're more likely to pick that up, right? My mom and my dad were both addicts and alcoholics. So I was at a greater risk for that. And then my decision making wasn't the best either. So there's that portion. In May 2007, I got deployed to Afghanistan for the first deployment. And I don't know if you guys like watch war documentaries or whatnot, but there was a documentary made about that deployment, my platoon, and it was called Restrepo. A second one was called Cornwall. And
can you drop the links of those names into our chat real quick? Because I would love to put some links in the show notes to that.
Yep. So the hard thing about finding Restrepo is it's not easy to find, and you actually have to do some digging. But you can find Cornwall anywhere. So there's that. So you can find that on Amazon, Cornwall on Amazon. That's the second one that was made. But it was made by Sebastian Junger, the guy who wrote The Perfect Storm. And he made some other stuff, and just great human being. But on that deployment, it was a 15-month deployment. So it was insane. The first 6 months of that deployment, I did absolutely nothing. Dan, like you asked earlier, I sat in the office. I watched stuff on radar. I received reports. I collaborated reports together and sent them to higher echelons. But after that 6 months, I actually got put in a fight. Funny story. The guy that I was replacing ended up setting himself on fire on accident. How did he do that? We had to burn our own shit. We had to burn our own shit. Like feces, human feces. We had to burn it. And all that stuff. And he took a gas can and poured it directly on the fire. The fire went up, in, and exploded. So somebody replaced him, and I had to replace that somebody. And so I did. And went to the Cornwall Valley in Afghanistan, and it was one of the most wild, intense times. I was 18 years old. I had like nobody to live for, dude. Like, my dad was out of my life. My mom was out of my life. I really didn't have family. I didn't have a girlfriend, none of that. So I had this mentality of like, if I die, I die. It doesn't fucking matter. Right?
Yeah. And Sean, you said that was wild, but I want to ask a question that would precede this.
Yeah.
What is it like when you're deployed? Like when they tell you you're going to go serve a tour, how do you get those orders, and what's going through your mind when it happens?
So it's not like an individual person gets an order and you go and you don't know anybody. You deploy with your whole unit.
Sure.
And so the unit packs up, they train, they get ready to fight, they train everything, they train for the environment, but you can't really like train for the mountains, right? Because that's where we were in the mountains. So you couldn't really train for that. The best you could do was like walk with a bunch of heavy weight. And so you do training rotations, and eventually you get your orders, you pack up, you fly out to, we flew to Turkmenistan because there's a base in Turkmenistan, and then we would fly into Bagram, which if you followed the news for the past 2 years, we pulled out of Afghanistan, pulled out of Bagram. That's where we flew to. That was the hub for us to disperse out through the rest of the country. And so we got to Bagram, and they gave us like a situation update of like the area that we were going to. It was a huge Air Force base, so like there was all the amenities. Like you had Burger King, you had fucking Subway, TGI. There was a TGI Fridays. All places, Afghanistan, TGI Fridays.
I think it's gone downhill a little bit. I used to like TGI Fridays.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I can't eat TGI Fridays anymore. Uh, so yeah, you fly there, and then you go to a smaller hub, and then that smaller hub leads you to where you're gonna go. It's
Mhm.
much like flying like a regular airplane.
Okay.
And so we get, I went to a bigger base right off the bat, so it was kind of like we had amenities, we had gyms, we had uh, big stores, like not big stores, but we had like American tobacco, we had American products. But then you go to like the smaller base, like ours was super small, really, really small to the point where like you could see the mountains across the way, and then you could see down the valley all the way to the end of it. It
Yeah.
was okay, and like if you've never seen Afghanistan, like pictures or videos, it is fucking gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And it is some of the most breathtaking mountain scenery I've ever seen in my life. But it sucks, right? Like the Taliban sucks. But I will say, in saying that, like a lot of people don't respect your enemy, and so I learned a great respect for the Taliban because we think that they're dumb because they live in the Middle Ages. But realistically, they're some of the smartest human beings you'd ever meet in your life. I don't know a human being that can devise a bomb out of nothing, and they did, and it was wild. They could move faster than we could. They could shoot better than we could. It was crazy, right? The complex attacks, and they've been doing this for since the existence of Afghanistan, right? With Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the Russians, anybody else who's there's never been a war that has been gone into Afghanistan and has been won by the people going in. That's a fact. Yeah. And it's because people didn't understand the concept of like how to fight in each terrain because you got every terrain in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You got mountains, desert, you've got uh desolate desert where it's just like you got moon sand and or red sand, and you got city, you've got forest, like you've got every environment that you can think of, and a lot. It's just a lot, and
Yeah.
you can't kill terrorism.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, you said the first 6 months were, I don't know if you said boring, but it sounded a little boring.
yeah, it was.
Although in war, I'd imagine boring can be good.
Yeah.
Um, and then the next 6 months, or however long that was. So it starts to change. You get an assignment. What happens?
Yep, yep. So I get assigned to Battle Company Second Battalion 503rd, and I get sent to the Korengal Valley, and it was insane. A lot of people can't fathom getting shot at, and when we mean shot at, like direct fire, about 7, 8 times a day, and that was happening every day, and it was wild. Direct fire being small arms fire, AK-47, Dishkas, Dragunovs, stuff like that. But then you get indirect fire with the mortars, rockets, all that stuff was happening all the time, RPGs. And then there's guys in other platoons that would need time off, so I'd go and fill in for them. They would come take my position for a little bit. I'd go down there. And like I said, I was 18 years old. I had zero, like, nobody to live for, no self confidence, no understanding of life, no gratitude of life. So, like, I was out there doing things I normally wouldn't do. I'd stand up in a firefight, bah, 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 bah. Get behind cover, stand up, leave myself a little bit more exposed. But my job, I had to observe the rounds coming down. And so, mortars were dropping, artillery was dropping. I was controlling aircraft all at one time. And it was madness. But I enjoyed it and I thrived in the chaos because when I was a kid, chaos was what I knew. So everything that was chaotic was fucking easy for me. And so that went on for like 9 months. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand is when you're in that mindset for an extended period of time, that fight or flight for an extended period of time, you don't know how to shut it off. So that's what a lot of veterans have a problem with, amongst other things, is like shutting that off. Right, when you join the military, they tell you get angry. Everything that you do, you're going to get angry, and you don't know how to shut that anger off. You don't know how to shut that fight or flight off. It's really hard, and so that was one of the things later on in life that I had to learn about. And so in that 6 months, man, like, that 9 months, like things were crazy. Like You know, it's not like Band of Brothers or any like war documentary that you would see where you're just walking and you go to one place, you walk, you go to another. Like you have a base that you go to and you operate out of, and then you'll go on a patrol, come back, go on a patrol. I've had close calls during that deployment, um, but nothing that I would say was like life altering to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in August 2008, we redeployed back to Italy, and that transition was hard. And it was hard because like 30 minutes after I got off the plane, I was back in my room drinking, like I had been before. So I was sober for 15 months, but not willingly sober, right? Like
Okay.
and so um, I was drinking for about a year straight, just like getting fucked up all the time. And like I was drinking to escape the things that had happened. I was drinking to try and fit in. I was drinking all these other reasons except for like to relax like a normal human being.
Yeah.
And I met a woman and she was 27, I was 20. Looking back now, that was a big age difference. And so I didn't understand the concept of relationships, all this other stuff. And I was just a child, man. I was a child. And November 2009, we got orders to go back to Afghanistan in December to the same province, different location. And so we're right back right back in that cycle of getting everything packed up, getting to go. We left, we were gone for 12 months. And that deployment changed a little bit for me, primarily because we weren't out like actively seeking out the enemy. Because that was when the surge was kind of dying down and we weren't like out there trying to fuck people up. We were out there defending ourselves and defending other people. And so like my unit, we did what's called QRF, or my platoon. We did quick reaction force. So if somebody in our area of operation got into a firefight that was bad enough that they needed backup, we were up out of our beds in a truck rolling out the gate in 15 minutes, which is like super hard because you got to get equipment ready, radios, all that stuff. And so we're up out of our bed moving it in 15 minutes en route to where we had to go. And that was like the common theme around the area. And on top of that, we were running route clearance patrols where we would go and drive down a certain stretch of road for an extended period of time, turn around and come back, or we would provide overwatch for other units that were driving through our area that had a lot more vehicles but a lot less weapons. And so we got into a lot of firefights that deployment, and I hit my first IED in that deployment. And if you guys don't know what IED is, it's an improvised explosive device.
Right.
It's either on the side of the road or in the road. And a week before my birthday, my 22nd birthday, we hit an IED, and I was in a truck. We were rolling. I guess we hit a pressure plate, which a pressure plate, a lot of people think it's just, is the bomb, right? And it's not. It's a release pressure plate. So you step on it, and then you release the weight, and it, boom, it blows up. And typically there's a bomb somewhere within the radius. Okay. And so our truck rolled over it, and when we rolled over it, it blew up right underneath me. And so we went ass up, nose down, face down, ass up. That's the way we like to fuck. And, and, we hit and we go nose down and we're like teetering for a second. Everybody, and I mean, everybody with the exception of me is knocked the fuck out from the concussion. And I grabbed my gunner because my gun, like I rode in the back seat and the gunner was right next to me, and I grabbed his thing and pulled him down. And when we landed, like blacked out for a second, came to, and driver and my lieutenant were knocked out, and my gunner was on the stand, and I see no blood coming out of his nose, and I was like instant thought was like, he's fucking dead, right? Like he's dead. And like I started freaking out a little bit. I'd never been put in a life or death situation like that before. And so I was like freaking out, like shaking him, smacking him in the face, releasing him from his harness. And he came to. And the only thing that happened was when we hit, his weapon came up and he was going down and it smacked him right in the face and knocked him out clean. Wow. So we got out of the vehicle and we got evaluated for traumatic brain injury and stuff like that. And took a few days off and then resumed. but yeah, we got back from that deployment a year later. The woman that I fell in love with, she would become my fiance prior to that deployment, was cheating on me. So that relationship was over. I got the Dear John pictures. It was great. Um, and
Was she American at the
no,
base, or was she
Italian?
Italian?
She was Italian. And so yeah, I mean, my life kind of changed halfway through that deployment when I found out like she was cheating on me. My mentality went from like I need to be a little bit more protective of myself to fuck it. I don't care if I die. And that's the drastic like life measures that I would live in, was just that mentality of like, if I die, I die. And so we get back, and once again, like I'm getting off the aircraft, half an hour later, I'm getting fucked up. And it was crazy. So for the next like 6 months, I was drinking a lot, a little bit less than that. And then I met a woman at a bar, and like her and I had been friends on Facebook, and we talked a little bit, but we went out and partied one night, and like we got really close really quick. And we ended up wanting to get married. And I got orders to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And so I had to transition from Italy to North Carolina. And when you get leave to go home and visit your family and make your way to your next duty station in between there. So I had like 30 days to fuck off. And she met me in Pennsylvania where my dad lived. And we had the bright idea of going to get fucking married. Yeah. So we got married in a courthouse.
I can hear by the tone that it worked out happily ever after.
I will say, in this venture of my life, I'm glad that she's still a part of my life.
Oh, okay.
And you're going to find out why. So
all right.
On the way to Fort Bragg from Pennsylvania, well, actually, when we got to Fort Bragg, like a month after we got there, we found out she was pregnant. And we wanted to keep the baby.
How old were you at this point?
Oh, fuck. I was like 23, 24.
Okay.
I was still a child. But I wasn't ready to like be a dad, right?
Yeah, right.
And I know that's really shitty to sound, you know, and to say, and I felt bad for even saying it the first few times, but I wasn't ready to be a dad, right? Like I still didn't have a grasp on my life. I didn't know who I was, none of that. And so we had this baby, but she was pregnant, and I got to Fort Bragg, and they were like, "Hey, dude, by the way, like, we're leaving in a few months to go to Afghanistan." Shoot me now, motherfucker. So
you got a new wife, you got a baby on the way.
Yeah.
Your new wife from Italy is now living in North Carolina with you.
Well, so she was American.
Oh, was she? Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
she was American. She was a dependent. Her and I were the same age, but she was going to school with her family over in Italy. Her dad was in the army. Her mom was not, and so like they had the family dynamic going there. They ended up getting stationed in Alaska, and so I ended up moving down to Fort Bragg, and she met me there. Anyways, we're doing the family thing, and I'm relapsing back and forth on alcohol, right? Like back and forth. She'll be like,
did she recognize that as an issue at the time?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Okay.
100%. 100%.
Did
She's
you
like,
consider it an issue?
fuck no. Here, I'll tell you my mentality. I was like, everybody else has the problem. Everybody's got a problem with my drinking. I don't have a problem with drinking. And that was the mentality that I held for a very long time. And so I was relapsing back and forth, and she kept giving me the ultimatum: if you don't quit drinking, I'm going to leave. And I'd be like, all right, cool. And then something would happen, and I would be like, well, I'm just going to have one. And then one led to, like, I was going back to the way I was.
Sure.
I mean, that's how it is. And so, we end up deploying to Afghanistan, and we spent 7 months in Afghanistan. And so some of the fucking wildest situations I've ever been in my life. Our unit was meant to go and patrol the roads and like pick out bombs so like other people could come through and be safe. God damn it. I'm telling you, that is, if you have never been in a situation where like you are tense all the time for no fucking reason or for a good reason.
I was going to say, I think I know the reason. Yeah.
If you're, yeah. So like we're walking, dude, and like Most units will find like one or two IEDs on the road. We were finding them like every 100 meters
Wow.
and just fucking walking, and boom, we'd get a hit, boom. But there was this big mission in May, at the end of May 2012, and it was going to be a week long mission where, like, if you watched war movies or war shows, we're walking and we're establishing a location, and then we're going to just keep continuing. And we had phase lines we had to hit and all this other stuff. And so, right before then, I had a best friend. His name was Nick Olivison. Him and I used to go to the gym all the time, right? Like, and I ran into him at Fort Bragg prior to deployment, and we became really good friends, and we became better friends on deployment. Like, the one thing that people don't understand is like the bond that you create with people while in those situations is one that you will never be able to replicate, right? Like,
Yeah,
I can
can't even imagine.
I can call somebody from my first deployment and be like, "Hey man, like I'm fucked up here." They'd be like, "Hey man, what's up? Let's talk." Right? Somebody that I haven't spoken to in 10, 15 years. And it's just like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so like him and I created this like really strong bond to the point where like when we were doing guard duties together, like we were asking to be switched so we would be in the same location so that we could fucking just hang out and talk and bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And so him and I had gotten into this argument a week prior to that mission. And we both exchanged the fuck yous, like, piece of shit, like, don't talk to us. And so prior to like every patrol I'd go and I'd tap everybody on the head and say I love you. And like that mission I did that, and I got to him, and he was our lead guy. He was our minesweeper. He was the guy that detected the IEDs or the signatures. I went up to him and I couldn't do it. Dude, my pride got in the way, and I was like, I just couldn't do it. And I turned back around and I sat down. We go on that patrol, and like we're an hour and a half into the mission, and he hits an IED. Like, steps on an IED. And he's not dead right away. But like that instant, like, fuck moment was there, right? Because these are stories that you hear in books or see in movies. Like that instant regret. And so, like, I remember everything about that situation. I remember the taste, the smell of the air. I remember the fucking scenery. Like, most people, when they experience traumatic injury or traumatic situations, they don't remember certain parts of it. And there's some of us that remember everything about it. And I remember everything about it. Like, it's ingrained in my head. And so I remember, like, walking up on him and seeing his legs gone. And it looked like somebody had taken, like, a fork and shredded it. And one of his arms was gone. The only reason that his other arm wasn't gone is because the minesweeper was there. And he was just laying there, pale. And like when he actually got out of shock, we had all the medics up there. There's like 4 of them working on him. And he looked at one of the female medics and was like, "You have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen." And that was like tear-jerking moment. And then, they were going to put tourniquets on him. And they had to reach into his pants because his legs were gone from above the knees, right? Okay. And so they're going to put tourniquets on him. And so they had to undo his pants. And he looked at one of the female nurses and he was like, "I just got a question." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Is my dick okay?" And like, that's the thing. Like, a lot of...
I was gonna say, is this a sincere question from someone in shock? Or okay, I wasn't sure if it was that or if he was still like trying to make a joke or something.
He was dead. He's like, "Is my dick okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's fine." And he's like, "All right, cool, good." And like, so they worked on him. They tried to stabilize him in everything that, every way that they could. We got him on a plane, but prior to all that, like, after that happened, I was looking around and seeing like we didn't have any rear security. And now, like, in an element like that, you got to have rear security, make sure nobody's sneaking up on you. So like, I walked out of the compound that we were in, because it was small, like 4-walled compound with an entrance and an exit. And he got hit on the opposite exit, or on the exit. And so like, I turned the corner and I seen like this fucking guy. And I swear to God, like, I seen this guy in all white, and he was walking. He had these prayer beads, and like the devil and the angel. That was the moment, one of the defining moments in my life, where like angel and devil were talking, and the devil was like, "Fuck him, take him out." And the angel was like, you don't know if this dude like had any part of this. And I was like, well, nobody else, like, the devil was like, nobody else is here, right? Like, Nobody can see this. If he fucking he had to have done it. And like the angel was like, don't do it, dude. And like I had my sights right on his forehead. My weapon was zeroed in, man. Like I put my selector switch on semi. I was like, and then he looked at me. And when he looked at me dead in the face, right, and I seen the fear in his eyes, I couldn't fucking do it, right? And like my humanity kicked in. And I lowered my weapon and told him to go. And like I'm really happy that I didn't pull the trigger, because that would be something like I had to live with for the rest of my life. And I probably would have gone to jail for that, because that would have been a war crime. And so, we get him on a Black Hawk, which is a medevac aircraft, and he dies on the way. And that was something I had to live with for my whole life. Like my pride got in the way, and I couldn't say I love you.
Yeah, that's an incredibly hard way to learn a lesson.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I get back from that deployment, but I'm like not the same. I'm not the same person that left Fort Bragg, and my at the time wife could see it. Mm-hmm. And I had pictures of everybody I had ever lost that I knew on the wall, and I was like, that's gonna help me process through this. But it really made me numb to everything.
Well, Sean, did you change for after each deployment, or do you think you more or less stayed the same until this one?
I think I changed a little bit after every deployment, mm-hmm. But that one in 2012 really changed me. Like I was angry all the time. I hated people. I hated myself more. I questioned everything about myself. I questioned like literally everything. My decision-making process was out of the window. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Sean, I've let this go a little bit longer than we have been lately, because I'm absolutely. Your storytelling it's hard to hear, yeah. in a good way. Yeah. In a good. I can't even imagine, and thank you for sharing a lot of this. And Dan, I'm saying this on purpose too, to know how much time you have.
I got all the time in the world for this, man. Okay. This is fantastic, and also, it's not about me, but I lost a cousin in Iraq to an IED, and here, I don't know if you could see the tears behind my glasses, but yeah, it's your story's hitting home a little bit, and I appreciate you telling.
I'm sorry for your loss, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you, and thank you for going through all the shit that you've gone through, man. But yeah, let's keep this going, and if you've got time, let's wrap it up within the next 20 to 30 minutes. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so yeah, I get back from that deployment, completely changed, and I'm relapsing back and forth again, because I really I don't have any concept of like what is going on in life and like how to manage these symptoms. And I go on one more deployment in 2014, and this one was not like the other ones, right? Like we weren't running combat missions. We weren't out there trying to pursue bad guys. We were guarding Department of State and a fucking hotel in Afghanistan, and it was chill. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what to do with myself, man. Like we had catered meals. We had like 3 catered meals every day. We had internet in the hotels. We had 3 gyms in the hotel. And I was working night times watching chat on a system, and I was just like, this is boring. But like what happens, at least with me, is like idle hands do the devil's work. So I had all this time to think, and I was like, well, do I really love my wife? Like, I love my kid. Do I love my wife? Right? And am I in love with her? And so, like, I came up with this idea, like, and this thought that, like, I love her because she's my daughter's mom, but I'm not in love with her. And I told her that, and like, God damn it. Everybody in my life turned away from me. You're abandoning your child. And I was like, no, I'm not. I want to be an active part of my child's life, but I don't want my child to be raised in a household where the parents hate each other. Because I was raised in like that.
Right.
I became public enemy number 1. So we go and we do the separation. The hardest thing that I had to face in that time was driving my daughter and her mother down to Georgia to be with her mother. And as I'm walking out the door, my daughter's standing at the door with her little snuggie, and she's like, "Dad, don't go." She's 3 years old at the time. Ripped me to shreds because, like, I said that to my dad, right?
Wow.
And I'm perpetuating this fucking cycle. And so yeah, I 8-hour drive back to Fort Bragg, cried the whole time, and it was just a really hard transition. And then after that, I met a woman. See, this is another cycle. I met another woman, and everybody's seen the red flags. I didn't see them. I got divorced, and less than 24 hours later, I was remarried. Like, we'll just cut the shit here, and I'll say 12 hours I was married, remarried. No fucking time, no time whatsoever, and that was a shitty relationship, absolutely terrible. I got ordered. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, I never served, but it seems to me like a lot of people who do serve get married young. Is that part of the service? Is this part of knowing that your job could get you killed? I mean, what is it? I just, it seems like a disproportionate number of service people get married young. And it just might be, I might be off base here.
Well, there's a statistic that like 80% of service members have childhood trauma.
Okay.
And so that's why we thrive in the chaos, is because like we're good at chaos. Like chaos is our business, right? So like we kind of perpetuate that chaos, and it sucks, and I'll be the first to admit it. Like I wasn't a great human being in that portion of my life. I made some really shitty decisions, and I did some really shitty things, and I hurt a lot of people that didn't deserve it. And I don't know why we get married at a young age. I think it's because we have this skewed vision of what love really is. Or we have this like skewed vision of what a healthy relationship looks like, because it wasn't modeled for us when we were kids. And yeah, so we get married at a young age, and it's a running joke. Like we don't divorce, don't marry a stripper, but that happens. She's doing it for the housing allowance. That really happens. But yeah, I got remarried, and then I re-enlisted because I was like, I love the Army. And then I hated it afterwards. But I got stationed in Alaska, right? Like drove all the way from North Carolina to Alaska, 11-day trip. It was wild. I had a great time. Got up there, and we were slated to go on another deployment, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. And they do this like pre-deployment memory test, or like functionality test of your brain, and I failed it on all levels: short-term, long-term memory, reaction time, and something else that shows my brain. Anyways, they were like, hey, look, dude, you got TBI. And I was like, what the fuck is TBI? And they're like, traumatic brain injury. It made a lot of sense. But I was in real big denial, and I was like, I don't have fucking TBI. What? You have TBI, right?
It's not me, it's you.
Yeah, I'm not crying, you're crying. So when they started running down the list of symptoms, I was like, yeah, I have that. I have all those. And so they put me in this pipeline to do treatment for TBI. And then the Army was like, dude, you're broken beyond like anything that we can do to fix you. We're going to either separate you or retire you. And like I started going through this identity crisis. So like in my life, when one thing falls, everything falls. I don't know how to manage life when one thing falls. And so my health started going down. So like work was going down. My relationship went down. Everything went down. My relationship with my child went down. And it was terrible. That was one of the worst times in my life. And 2018, I had a suicide attempt because I just felt like I have no reason to live anymore. And I was going through all this physical pain, this emotional pain. My relationship was pretty much over because found out she was cheating on me. To work, I was losing my job unwillingly. I didn't want to lose it, but I was losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I have no purpose to live anymore. Like, people are like, oh, your kid. She has a stepdad that is like 1,000 times the man that I am. Don't really give a fuck, right? Like, she's going to be okay. But in reality, like, my daughter needed me. She still does. Right?
Of course.
And I put my truck into a tree at 70 miles an hour. And I woke up in the hospital. And, some survivors will say, they're happy to be alive. And I just woke up and I was like, why the fuck am I still here? What did I do wrong? And I ended up getting released from the hospital, went home, and a good buddy of mine, Jeremy, pulls up. He was one of my soldiers. He pulls up. He's like, hey, man, I don't trust that you're going to be okay in your house by yourself. Come live with me. So he pulled me out of the house. I went and stayed with him for a night or two. And that man saved my life because I probably would have tried to end it again. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, are other, I mean, I can't imagine that there's anybody you can really talk to aside from other veterans.
Yeah, I mean, but like I have this understanding of like suicide and suicide attempts now versus then, right? Like I can talk about suicide. I've gone and talked to corrections officers about it.
Sure.
I've gone and talked to other people about it. Like I'm not afraid to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I just mean, who else can relate to this life that you had lived in your early adulthood? It's that's something hard. Most of us don't ever have to go through.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Veterans. I talked to a lot of veterans about it, and we'll get into that here in a second. But I ended up like realizing that I had a problem that I couldn't control and I couldn't fix, and so I checked myself into the hospital on base, and I spent 11 days inpatient, like typical, like white clothes, no shoelaces, white rooms, getting meds every day, and I learned a lot, right? And I appreciate that. And then I did 11 days outpatient. And that I absolutely needed that. And then I went through with my divorce, and I got divorced. And then shortly after that, I met a woman.
How many hours?
Like 12 hours?
It wasn't hours, okay? It was a month, all right? All right.
30 times 24.
Yeah.
720 hours.
How many fingers do I have? I'm not good at math. But I met a woman, and she told me everything I wanted to hear, right? And it was hard, right? Like, it was hard to transition from that last relationship into this one because I was going from, I had baggage. And we didn't get married right away, which I'm happy about. We waited. But I got kicked out of the Army in that time. Not kicked out. I was medically retired. And so when I got medically retired, like and I hear, I know that, in the news, you'll hear a lot about the VA, and like VA sucks, and they do at certain points, at least with the benefits portion. So I didn't have an income coming in. I applied to all these jobs, and I wasn't getting any hits back. And I was just in a really bad time in my life. I was sober during that time, but like, I was like, oh, it's legal to smoke in Alaska? Yeah, let's do it. So like I traded one substance for another because I was always high.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing it to like relieve any stress. Like I was doing it to get fucked up. And I ended up going to I got a hit on a job at the airport, working for a smaller business. So I went, I interviewed for them. I got the job, and I started working customer service. Now I'm working in a section of all women, interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I fucking hate people. I fucking hate people. But I was really nice about it, right? Like very judgy, but very nice. But I was very nice about it. And, but all the men and like around were fucking terrified of me, right? I'm big bearded guy. I'm short. I'm like 5'5", right?
Me too.
On a
me
good
too.
day.
All right.
I'm like 5'5" on a good day. All right.
Okay.
And like, but I got this big ass beard, and I look like a Viking, and people are like, that's terrifying. and the things I used to say, God damn it, the things I used to say used to scare the shit out of people. And so like, I would walk into my manager's office, female. She understood my sense of humor. Everybody else didn't. And so like she had this meeting, and I remember very candidly, she had this like meeting one day with all the other managers, with the exception of like the big manager, and they're all in the office. I walk in, I'm like, knock, knock, knock. I'm like, Angie, what's the fastest way to a man's heart? She's like, I don't know, food. And I was like, no, an axe. Just turn around and walk away. And they're like, what? What? And it scared them. And I didn't understand. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm cool. All right. Like, right. But I was very intimidating. And I don't like that. I didn't like that about myself because I don't consider myself intimidating, but other people do. And that's perception.
Mm-hmm.
That drives people away.
I was gonna say I've gotten that on occasion, not often, but on occasion. Again, I'm 5 foot 5 3/4 inch man, and you said the beard, and yeah, people see a certain look, and my humor's dark as well, often, and to me, you say that, and it's like clearly just a joke, nothing else, and I get myself in trouble on occasion that way too. But to me, I can't even comprehend how that's anything but a joke.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I can't see that. I couldn't at the time see like how I could scare people. I was like, I'm just this nice guy, right? All the women think I'm nice, but the guys don't.
Even the exes.
But yeah. Right. I'm doing this customer service job, and I'm with this woman that I like, and we get married in May, 2019. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, you know what? I think I can drink one more time. I think I got this, right? Like, I'm no longer in the army. I'm in a better headspace. I'm with somebody. Like, I'm making all these excuses for why I'm going to drink.
Okay.
And so July 4th, 2019, 4th of July, Independence Day, I had my last drink. Well, not my last drink, but my last relapse. And I started that one. That one lasted like 9 months. Oh, yeah, 6 months. And so like I went and I was like, I think I'm good to drink. I'm just going to have one. And then one led to like 5 that night. And I was like, the next night I was like, I'll be good. I'll have 2. And then 2 led to 5. And then I went right back to the way I was drinking, right? And so like that relapse lasted for 6 months. And December 7th, 2019 was like any other day, right? I went to work. I was driving home. I had to drive by a gas station. So I was like, oh, it's a Friday. I'm going to get home. We're going to play Cards Against Humanity like we always do. And so like stop in the gas station. I had a little bit more money in my account because I got that Christmas pay. I got the Christmas bonus, right? And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm hot shit.
Feeling good,
feeling great. I'm a little bit uplifted, and I get 2 bottles of Hennessy this time, not 1, 2. God damn it! And so like I get home and I pull in the parking space. I didn't even turn the vehicle off, and I already cracked a bottle and was drinking. And I get into the house. I don't remember a lot. And I came to, and it was December, and I came to, and I'm outside of my house with no shirt on. And it's snowing, and it's fucking really cold outside. I had no business being outside, but I was like angry, dude. Like I was fucking. And I go back in the house, and my house is destroyed. Holes in the wall all over the place. My shit is all over the ground. My collectibles, like Funkos, were like destroyed. I'm like, what the fuck happened here? And I look down the hallway, and my wife is on the floor. But I know, like, I'm angry, and I'm like, I need to get the fuck out of here. So I left. And I called her the next morning, and she's like, you hit me. And I said, what? She's like, you hit me. I said, I don't remember any of that. She was like, you did. She never gave me a reason to, like, doubt her. So I was like, you know what? Fuck this, man. I'm out of control. So I called the police. I called Anchorage PD, and I said, look, y'all have to fucking arrest me now. Like, I will meet you somewhere. You fucking handcuff me. And they did. And I went and spent 20 days in Anchorage jail on an assault charge. And but that was a misdemeanor, and I got a felony for criminal mischief, which is like just breaking my own shit, right? Acting an ass. And I spent 20 days in jail, but in that 20 days, man, like I was like blaming everybody for my problems. It's like, it's fucking my dad's fault, my mom's fault, because I'm an alcoholic, because they were fucking addicts and alcoholics. It's my wife's fault. She could have like told me not to drink. I would have listened to her. It was my roommate's fault. He could have choked me the fuck out. But I had this native man, old native man. He was like, Viking, shut the fuck up. They call me Viking in jail. And he was like, Viking, shut the fuck up. And I was like, who are you to talk to me like that? He's like, you created all these problems in your life. Like, when you accept that and you accept that you have caused a lot of the damage in your life, you'll be all right. But until then, you're going to be right here where we are. That was my first trip to jail and my only trip to jail. And so I sat there. That was on December 27th. And I sat there in my cell. And at first I was like, man, fuck him. Like, who is this old ass man to tell me how to fucking live my life? He don't know me. But then, like, I sat and I was like, you know what? He's actually right. Like, all these damaged relationships I had, like, a lot of these people with a problem, but I am a huge contributor to it. And, like, just sat there and I played my life out, right? Like, played the tape. And I was just like, I fucked a lot of this up. And the crazy shit happened. I accepted it. I got a knock on myself from the CEO, and he was like, hey, pack your shit up. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, your bail got posted. I was like, what? He was like, your bail got posted. He was like, we're waiting on electronic monitoring to put your ankle bracelets on. I was like, okay, all right. And and I got released. And that's the day that I say that I started my recovery is that day, December 27th, 2019.
Do you know who that man was? Have you ever seen him again? Had you seen him before?
The guy that gave me the advice?
Yeah. Yeah.
I do know who he is. I haven't seen him, but I seen his brother. Because when I was in recovery, I found out like his brother was in recovery. His brother was a veteran, and him and I were in the same center together.
Wow.
And I went to him. I said, your brother gave me some of the best advice that I've ever received, and I fucking needed it. And the next time you see him, tell him thank you. And yeah, so I entered into recovery. I went to what is called like a drug court, like they're called different things, but they're called drug courts or felony DUI or like mental health courts. But ours was a therapeutic court designated for veterans. And I got into it, and it was a 9-month program for me. I was held accountable for everything. Every decision I made, every decision that I was gonna make, I was held accountable for. I entered into therapy, individual and group. I went into counseling. I had UAs every day. I had to go to AA meetings, at least 3 times a week, but I went every single day because I knew I needed it. And it was just one of the things that really got me on this path of recovery. And I just sit in front of a judge every Monday. And the first Monday I went in there, my wife was there, my ex-wife now, but my wife was there. And she sat there through the whole process. And she supported me through the whole process. And like, I was in front of a judge, and the judge was like, man, from my understanding, you've tried to get sober many times and you failed. What's different now? And I was like, I have to do it for myself. Right? Like, I've done it for everybody else. I have to do it for myself. And if I'm not doing it for myself, I'm going to relapse again. And I'm not making it back this fucking time. And that was a foreshadowing of things to come. But I graduated the program October 2020. And November 2020, some of the participants that were still in the program, we call them participants because they're not patients, they came to me, they said, hey, we got process groups for civilians, but we don't have a process group for veterans, right? We have this alumni meeting where graduates of the therapeutic courts hold meetings every week and talk about, their week or like a specific topic. And so I reached out to the alumni group and I said, hey, I'd like to start a veteran group. And I started a veteran group November 2020, and it's still going strong. And I facilitate that all the way from Maryland to where I'm at now. But yeah, I've done a lot since then, and I've done a lot of growing, and life has changed for me significantly. I haven't had a relapse. I've had a lot of things come up since then that were very detrimental, that if in my old life, my old way of thinking, I would have relapsed. But, I have these tools and these skills that I've learned now, and it's helped me out a lot. I'm a better version of who I used to be. I'm a better version of myself than I was yesterday. I am a better human being, better father, I'm a better partner. Just better individual.
It's
Wow.
amazing, man. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I've been, I have lived not a similar life, not a parallel life, but I also have been sober for the last 2 years, just over 2 years.
That's fucking huge. Congrats.
The same to you, my man. And yeah, the conclusion for me is the same: that I'm a better father, I'm a better partner, and I'm in a better place with a better understanding of who I actually am. And yeah, I sat in a recruiter's office when I was 18 or 19, and I feel like I could have had a very parallel life. I just made some slightly different choices at that time, but it's amazing to hear the way that you've shared that and the way that you've lived, man. And yeah, I appreciate the hell out of you.
All right. Well, hug it out, guys. Hug it out.
Come here.
Sean,
Come here, man.
I'll take it.
and I'm sorry, Sean, where are you located right now?
I moved back home to Sharpsburg, Maryland.
All right. The main reason I asked is because we've got a lot of fans in Maryland. One of my friends lives outside Baltimore, and she basically walks up to strangers on the street and says, "Listen to this podcast."
Nice.
Maybe exaggerating
Big thanks
just
to
a
all
little
three
bit.
listeners out there in Maryland too.
Yeah, 4 now.
Picking them up.
Well, one of those experiences is one of those life altering experiences is what led me back home.
Yeah.
This past December, I was in Alaska, and within a matter of 4 days, I went from my ex-wife saying I'm not happy to I don't want to be in this marriage to I bought a house to I'm moving out.
Okay.
And I sat in my house for 2 weeks in absolute ruins, man. Right? Like I thought everything was fine, right? Absolute ruins. But I knew the one thing that wasn't like not gonna fucking happen was I'm not gonna drink, right? Like if it was an hour, I wasn't gonna drink. If it was 24 hours, I'm not gonna drink. And I took all those skills that I learned in early recovery and I applied them to that situation. So like I lived on my phone 24/7. I went to meetings more actively than I was. I attended recovery meetings that I didn't fucking need to go to, but like I knew were gonna help. And then I was just like, I was like, I gotta go visit my dad, right? Like I gotta do something. I gotta change my situation. So I packed enough clothes to like be gone for a month, and came down here, and within that time, like here's a reoccurring theme too. Within that time, I found out like she was cheating on me and had been since August, and it fucked me up hard. Right? Because like this was a woman that said, I'm never going to use your trauma against you. And she did. She said, I'm never going to cheat on you. And she did. All these promises that she made, she did. And it fucked me up hard. But I knew the one thing I wasn't going to do was drink. No, my dad is a drinker. Still is. And I went to his house. And he actively drinks in the house. And I could be around it and not be triggered by it, not be like, I need to fucking get out of here. And so that showed me that proved to me like my recovery is working because A, I didn't relapse in the hardest time in my life in my recovery. B, I could be around it and not be triggered by it. 3, I didn't need it to survive, and I didn't need it to overcome what I was going through or to be a reason to be a dickhead. So in that time, I re-engaged therapy. I went back to therapy. I was still doing all the things that I needed to do to stay sober and to maintain that recovery. And I'm still sober. And it's the best fucking gift that I've ever been given in my life.
Yeah. That's awesome. We had one guest talk about addiction early in our run, and he said that his what he called kind of a simple life at this point is a better life than he could have ever dreamed of when he was in the midst of his addictions. And I mean, it's an amazing thing to hear, and it sounds like for all of our guests and for you that it really changes your perspective, and once you get to where you're trying to go, you can really appreciate what you've got, and I think that's wonderful.
I'm grateful for everything I have.
Yeah.
Right. Like I used to be like want more. Right. And that was my thing is more. I had this problem of more. I have to get more. And now it's just not that. I'm grateful for what I have. Right.
Yeah.
I'm medically retired from the Army. I'm retired at the age of 35. I was retired at the age of 31, 32. Right. I live at home where I'm surrounded by my family. Not at home, but I'm close enough to my family where I can be around them if I wanted to or needed to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a caring relationship now where it's a mutual relationship, and where nothing. And I know that you guys are like, this motherfucker got into another relationship.
hey, you do it enough times, you're going to get it right once. No,
I went into this one with the expectation of I just want to be friends, right? Like I don't want anything else. I just want to be friends. I want to get to know the person that I'm going to be in bed with before I fucking step into that realm, because that's a really tricky wick. And we became friends, and we have a lot in common, but we have so much not in common that it's good. It's entertaining. It's refreshing, right? And like I have my thing, she has her thing. I podcast, I do video editing, I do so much stuff, right? And like I'm fulfilled with what I have, but I'm not forgetting what I have, right? And I don't necessarily need for more or want for more. I'm just grateful for what I have. I help other people in their recovery, and that is fulfilling to me.
Hell yes.
It's awesome, man.
We have run long, and it's been because you've been such a great storyteller, and I think our fans, our terrible listeners, fans might be a strong word. I like to think of them as fans, but let's be real. They tolerate us. Our terrible listeners do tolerate us a little bit. They're probably happy that
they tolerate us, but I'm pretty sure they're going to love you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. The point I was going to make is you've had me shut the fuck up for most of this. I've just been listening like everyone else, so they're probably thankful for that. I can talk too much at times. But what else? So you're working with veterans, and we're going to start wrapping up. What does that look like?
So I work with the Alaska Therapeutic Court alumni, and I facilitate groups every Wednesday night at 11 o'clock my time, 7 theirs.
Okay.
PM.
And you can do that remotely?
Yep. I do it over Zoom. And we do process groups for an hour. Sometimes it runs longer. I've had groups that's run 2 hours just because like people have these really deep shares, and I don't fucking care, right? If it's helping them, it's helping me.
Right.
And so we either do topic-driven conversations that deal with recovery or deal with life, or we'll do like a general check-in. And everybody has my phone number, so if shit goes down, goes south, they always know they can call me. I also help veterans on social media. I help anybody in recovery on social media, anybody seeking recovery on social media. And I do podcasting, right? Like I love this shit. Like I was so terrified when I first started, but I fucking love it now.
Well, when you were talking about being fulfilled with some of the things that you're doing, I've never had that feeling until I started doing this podcast. It's been life-changing for me, and I have not been at my best with physical health in the last several months, but the one time a week or 2 times a week or whatever that I feel like myself are when we record, and I forget everything else. It's such a cool thing. So your podcast, Recover Out Loud, is one of them. I would imagine that the recovery and addiction are the type of things that you dive into.
Yep, absolutely. So we primarily talk about addiction and recovery there. I have people that are in recovery. I have people that support people in recovery. I have doctors, psychologists, you name it. If you have a situation that you recovered from, whether it be mental health or addiction, I'm here to hear the story, and I love it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. And is that available everywhere?
Yep, it's available everywhere to include iHeartRadio. I just got approved for iHeartRadio. That's awesome.
Oh wow, very
All
nice,
right.
very nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations! That's super exciting. And you said you had another one, paranormal. What was that one? Under the Veil?
Beyond the Veil.
Beyond the Veil. It's close.
Yeah.
So Beyond the Veil debuts November 6th. And it primarily focuses on people that work in the paranormal field, psychics, mediums, investigators, demonologists, more. I've had somebody that's not necessarily a UFO expert, but she lived outside of Skinwalker Ranch and presented evidence in that episode. It was fucking awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I seen Dan like, oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I'll be subscribing to episode 1.
So the venture of Beyond the Veil started because during October I do spooky content, right? Like I stray a little bit away from the recovery stuff because like it gets a little heavy at times, right? And like break up the content. And during the month of October, I wanted to find a certain niche of guests, and 2 of my guests bailed, and I went to the podcast community. I was like, hey, I'd like to fucking interview somebody that is, X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
And the amount of outpouring of people that say, I want to share my story, share my experience. I was like, I cannot not fucking start a show. Right? Like, I have to start a separate show. And so I did. And, my spooky month is about to wrap up next week. I actually have that guest. I kind of formatted everything to lead into this guest, but I have a Catholic exorcist. That
Wow.
is his episode is on Halloween. that fucking episode, I'll tell you, that episode changed the way I look at everything.
Okay.
Everything.
You said on Halloween. You mean it's releasing on Halloween? Like literally? That's okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
48 hours.
That's right. Well, this episode will air after that. So all our terrible listeners,
true.
go back. We'll put a link to that episode in the show notes because that's going to be fire. I can't wait to listen to that.
Yeah, it's exciting. I had Sean Austin from 28 Days Haunted on before that, and I've had a psychic medium, a paranormal investigator from Tennessee on, and then a personal friend prior to that. So yeah, I have a lot of stuff. I have a year's worth of content. I have a wrestler I recorded for Recover Out Loud. I have more wrestlers coming on because I'm a huge wrestling fan. You can't tell because it's audio, but for everybody listening, I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. I love everything WWE, AEW. So yeah, when I got those people to say, hey, I'm going to share my story, I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it.
You know what? And one of our Maryland guests that we've had on before was also our last huge. He had tattoos didn't he have Ric Flair tattoos, if I remember correctly? Dan, do you remember which one he had?
Nice.
But so yeah, awesome. That's incredible. Sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun with your paranormal adventures, I guess is the word that I was looking for. But as
not ghost adventures.
What's that?
Said not ghost adventures. Wink.
I'm
we
glad
don't
you
like Zach Bacon in this house.
I'm glad that you said the wink out loud, since we they can't quite see you. But as we wrap up, Sean, is there any last thing that you'd want to say to our listeners, whether it's about trauma, addiction, the choice of joining the military? I just kind of like to hear a little wisdom from you that you've experienced or picked up over the years.
If you're going to do something, do it for yourself. Don't do it for anybody else. If you do it for somebody else, you're going to fucking fail. You're going to feel this sense of lack of empowerment. And do it for your fucking self, man. Everything you achieve in life, do it for yourself, right? There is no right way to do things. There's multiple right ways to do things, right? So just because their way is right to them doesn't mean your way is not right to you. And finally, like, do what you love, right? I see so many people that suffer through life living a fucking life that they hate, that they just despise. Do what you love. Do it. Because if you do what you love, you're never going to work a day in your life. I know sometimes it's easier said than done, but it's true.
Yeah.
If you do, dude, I love doing this shit, right? And this is I consider it my job, right? Like, I fucking love podcasting. There's days where I hate it, but overall, I love it.
I hate trying to do the social media for it.
Oh yeah.
But aside from that, I get it, and you're speaking directly to me more than you know. I'm in a transition in life right now, where I've left my job, and now it's okay figuring out what the next steps are. And I am lucky to be in that position. I think that a lot of people who are able to do that, are very lucky. And sometimes it's a mixture of luck and a willingness to follow what you value and understand that money does pay the bills, so there's a baseline that you need to get to. I'm not going to tell anyone that money doesn't make life easier, but also doing something that's fulfilling has a value to it too. And if you're sacrificing a few dollars but are able to follow your passions, it's absolutely worth it, and something that's been scary for me to think about throughout my life, and I finally decided to do it. So, those words are kind of inspirational to me, and I'll make sure to keep you updated on my journey. But overall, man, thank you so much for being here today. It's been wonderful. Dan and I probably spoke less than we've ever spoken in an interview before because we were sitting here captivated. So thank you so much. I'm so glad you were not only able but willing to come and share with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And if you guys hear this howling in the background, my neighbors have like 8,000 Dalmatians.
I just thought that shit was haunted.
Okay. Well, I debunked it for you.
I thought Dalmatians were only bought and sold in quantities of 101. So 8,000.
It's a little bit dramatic, but it's close.
Yeah. So awesome. I did hear it. It's part of the charm of doing some remote podcasting and even remote work. Dan and I have worked remote. Like I said, I'm transitioning, but I've got 2 days left. My last one is your Halloween episode. My last day is on Halloween. So I guess I know what I'll be doing Tuesday night. But anyway, thank you again. You've been an amazing guest. As I always love to say, you've passed the decent fucking human test. You're a quality dude. I've really enjoyed it. Dan, I'm sure, has enjoyed it. I always speak for him at this point. But we're honored, humbled, grateful, all of those fun words that your willingness to be with us and share. And I guess, terrible listeners, remember to like and follow our socials. Listen to Sean's podcasts. We'll send some links out about those. Then if you could leave us a review and follow the podcast on any of the podcast platforms. But listeners, thank you today for joining us. And as always, it's been absolutely, positively terrible.
I met you back at Tonic Fest. I confess I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right. And that night we got into a water gun fight that I won. I shot you in the face. It was fate. I offered you a spring. You declined. I said, keep it. You might decide to change your mind. You did. Yeah, you did. Now I'm glad I got you. I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best, I was right.
Positively Terrible is a part of the Terrible Podcast Network.